What is going on, everyone? My name is Andy. Welcome back to another FPL video. In this one, it's my team selection for Game Week 20. So I'm going to show you how the team is shaping up for the upcoming week. And I've got to be honest, with the double game weeks and 2 free transfers, I could do anything from rolling a transfer to taking a -8. There are just so many options this week, and I'm going to try and talk through all of them and quickly show you how I'm doing in Game Week 19 as well. So if you do enjoy the video, make sure to give it a like. If you haven't done so already, hit that subscribe button. And here's just a quick word from our sponsors. So happy to say that this video has been sponsored by Fantasy Fire, which is a completely free-to-play game with a £10,000 jackpot up for grabs. And that jackpot has already been won 6 times since the game launched 2 years ago. You just need to be 18 or over and click that link in the description below to get signed up. All you have to do is pick 5 players from 5 different matches that you think will outscore their fantasy points target. And the scoring system is exactly the same as FPL, just without the bonus points. So I'm going to go ahead and pick my team. Now, the first match is Brighton versus Liverpool. And looking through some of the points targets for these players, there's a good chance the jackpot could be won this weekend. I think there's goals on both sides for both Liverpool and Brighton, so I'm actually going to go a little bit different and go for a Brighton player and pick Matoma. For Forest versus Leicester, Leicester just haven't defended well for most of this season, so I'm going to go for Brennan Johnson. And then with Brentford versus Bournemouth, if Tony does end up missing out, then Mbommo would be on penalties, and he only has to beat a points target of 6.5, so that's who I'm going to go for. And I'm already through 3 of the 5 teams. It is that quick to enter, and with £10,000 up for grabs, it's a bit of a no-brainer to give it a go. Newcastle versus Fulham again. I think Newcastle will end up winning this one. Callum Wilson, 9.5 points is interesting. Almiron, listed as a midfielder, slightly less points target. I'm going to go for him. And then Spurs versus Arsenal. Kane's only on 6.5, and I know that is a difficult game, but with penalties and guaranteed minutes, I'm going to go for him. That is it. That's all you have to do, and then you just confirm your selection. So there we go. Super simple to pick up and play, completely free, and there's a £10,000 jackpot. There's no reason not to give it a go. Link in the description below. If you're outside the UK and Ireland, there's a second link just below that one where you can still play for free, and there's a £2,500 jackpot up for grabs. Make sure you give it a go. You just need to be 18 or over, and make sure you bet responsibly. So just a real quick look at Game Week 19, because it feels like it was ages ago and it's not even over yet. So the Chelsea and Fulham game to finish off the game week is tonight. I'm recording this on Thursday morning, and as it stands, I'm on 46 points, and I am on a small red arrow. I don't think that will get massively worse tonight unless Andreas Pereira goes and gets a double-digit haul, which is possible because he will be on penalties with Mitrovic out, or at least you'd assume so, because that's what happened before. But I still have Kepa in goal, so if he can get a clean sheet, and if Mason Mount can maybe, I don't know, start like he didn't do in the other game against Man City, which is a little bit frustrating because I chose him because of the fixtures and the double game week, and mostly because of his minutes as well. So not to start one game was a little bit annoying, but if he's only going to get one game and it's the Fulham game, then I would probably take that. So hopefully he can get me something as well. With Mitrovic captain, very happy that he outscored Haaland, right? I always like captain and a double game week player, and I know people say it's overrated and there was risk with Mitrovic, and of course there was, and that literally happened. He got the yellow card, and I know you can say, well, if this happened or that happened every single week, it would be different, right? I get that, but if he doesn't get that yellow card, he's on a 9-pointer with another game, and it could have been an even better captain score. So I'm always willing to take that risk because the upside is there. Unfortunately, he did get the yellow. It wasn't a yellow card offence, I don't think, for the foul. Now, I didn't watch the game. A lot of people were saying that he was up in the ref's face a lot, so maybe that's what the yellow card was for. But he literally went from 9 points, because he was on 3 bonus at the time, to falling down to 5 points and not having that extra fixture. But I don't care. He outscored Haaland, so I absolutely take it. Elsewhere, Trippier got points. When doesn't he? Obviously, that was the draw with Arsenal, so Ben White got a clean sheet as well. I think the most frustrating thing for me this week, outside of kind of maybe Mason Mount and my double game week plays in general, is probably Cancelo getting another 1-pointer. Extremely frustrating because I was genuinely looking at getting Luke Shaw. I wasn't sure whether they would, no pun intended by the way, I wasn't sure whether they would definitely get a double game week in Game Week 20, so I decided to roll the transfer, whereas now I've got to pay a little bit more for him. They do have a double game week, and I've missed out on kind of an extra 14 points as well. So a little bit frustrating, but that is FPL for you. We can't moan about it too much, although you'll probably hear me moan about it again before the deadline. But that is Game Week 19. 46 points, small red arrow. Let's see what happens tonight. So before we look at my team, I want to talk about the results in the Carabao Cup, why it's important for Game Week 25 and why you should take it into consideration before you make your transfers for Game Week 20. So this is an image I've taken off Ben Crellin's Twitter account. Make sure you follow him if you're not already. And essentially, the two teams that get through to the Carabao Cup final will have their game in Game Week 25 postponed. So obviously their opponent wouldn't play either. Now there is a note on the right-hand side that says postponements become blanks if either team reaches the FA Cup fifth round. They might become blanks anyway, okay? So if Man United were to get to the Carabao Cup final, their game against Brentford would be postponed, and if either Man United or Brentford got to the FA Cup fifth round, it would be a blank game week. So any players you've got from those teams wouldn't play. Now it's quite important because Man United, Newcastle, Southampton and Nottingham Forest, the four teams in red, are the teams in the Carabao Cup semi-final right now. And importantly for FPL, Man United and Newcastle were kept apart. So Man United are playing Nottingham Forest and Newcastle are playing Southampton. Now obviously, as we saw last night, right, any team can beat any team, but the chances are, or the odds are, that Man United and Newcastle would go through to the final. If that happens and you've got like Trippier and Botman and I don't know, Martial, Rashford, Luke Shaw, you've then got 5 players that have got a very good chance of blanking in Game Week 25. So you need to think about that before you load up on them this week. It's not to say you should avoid them, but you've got to think about not only what it will gain you this week or next week or whenever, but also what you might lose in Game Week 25. Of course, Southampton and Nottingham Forest could win both of those games and go through, and then it wouldn't matter so much, but the chances are that wouldn't happen, right? That's not what the odds will say. The other important thing is Southampton did beat Man City last night, which just shows, right, any team can beat anyone. And that means that Man City's game in Game Week 25 is now confirmed on. So they will play Bournemouth away. If they got on through and got onto the final, that fixture might be off. That's also important because they have a double game week in Game Week 20. They have another one in Game Week 23. And they've now definitely got a fixture in Game Week 25 as well. So their players almost become a little bit more valuable. Now, obviously, we know for Man City that outside of Ederson, De Bruyne and Haaland, it gets very difficult to know which players are going to play. And I'm going to talk through that as we go. But if you can nail the right 3, they look pretty good over the next few weeks. So that's just something important to talk about for the Carabao Cup, and I'm going to go through that as I talk through my team, because honestly there are lots of options I could go through, but that is important. Obviously follow Ben if you're not already, and anything else that changes, doubles, blanks, I'll try and keep you updated as we go. So my team is somewhat of a mess, especially in defence, but I do have 2 free transfers and 1.2 million in the bank to try and figure it out. So I've got Ben White with Spurs away. I'm not expecting a clean sheet. Cancelo, I don't even know if he'll start once, let alone twice. Patterson is injured, and somehow I still own Reece James, and he's injured as well. So I'll come on to the defenders in a second. Just quickly on goalkeepers, I'm not completely ruling out bringing in Ederson. Now, I don't usually like spending that much money on a goalkeeper, but he's pretty much the only defensive option from Man City that I can guarantee will start every single game. And obviously they've got the double in 20 and 23, and they've got that guaranteed fixture in Game Week 25 against Bournemouth as well. And we shouldn't forget that we do have a second wildcard. Now, I don't know when I'm going to play that, but I would suspect it to be around Game Week 30. So if I do bring Ederson in, it's not like I have to have him for the rest of the season. What I will do is look at what potential future moves I would want to make. So there is a possibility of me trying to bring in De Bruyne, for example, without getting rid of Salah or Haaland. And if I want to do that, there's no way I can have a goalkeeper that costs 5.4 million. So I'd have to think about that before I did it. I wouldn't even necessarily get rid of Kepa. I might keep him on the bench just because he's so cheap. And I was about to say in a good Chelsea team, but obviously they're not good right now, but they at least have the manager and the players with the capability of getting better. So having a 4.5 million goalkeeper might be worth keeping. So again, not completely ruling out doing Ward to Ederson. And if we look at the fixtures for Man City, so they've got the double in Game Week 20, which we know about. Then Wolves at home is a good fixture. Spurs away is tough. Then it's another double. Then it's Nottingham Forest. Then it's Bournemouth. Then Newcastle is tough, but it's a home game. Then Palace, West Ham, Liverpool, Southampton. And that takes us to Game Week 30. At some point then, I'm going to look to wildcard anyway. So having that extra money locked in for those extra fixtures could be worth it, and I'm tempted to do it, even though I don't like having that much money wrapped up in a goalkeeper. So that's one thought. Defenders. Trippier is great. I don't even have to talk about him. Ben White is a good long-term option. I just don't really want to play him this week unless I absolutely have to. I think the main issue for transfers for defenders this week is I'm only really looking at 3 teams. So you've got Newcastle, so a double up with Botman. I don't mind that, but as I've just talked about with the Carabao Cup fixtures, there is a good chance that Newcastle will blank in game week 25. So doubling up on them and trying to get Man United players in at the same time, not necessarily ideal. I might gain points now, but I could lose them later on if I've got a lot of issues to deal with. So I'm looking at them. The other one is Man United, so I would probably go for Luke Shaw. I'm pretty sure, not again, no pun intended, he will come into my side this week one way or another. I was quite tempted to go for Dalot because he was a little bit cheaper and obviously he was back from his injury, but he did go off in the last game for Man United. Now, Ten Hag did say that was precautionary, but I'm just not sure I'm willing to take the risk, so I'll just pay the extra for Luke Shaw. So he will come into my side one way or another this week. The other defensive team I'm looking at is, of course, Man City. Now, last night's game against Southampton, I watched it. It wasn't great. Man City didn't play well, but it was a very changed side. I know their second side is still very good, but it's not encouraging as a Cancelo owner that he was part of that when the likes of Haaland, De Bruyne, Rodri, Ederson were all benched, and so was Rico Lewis. And I think Rico Lewis has now done enough. Like, before I was speculating whether Pep was talking him up, not just because he actually thought he was good, but also trying to get his other players to start playing better. I think he might just be saying he's really good and he's happy to play him. So I think there's a good chance he plays right back, at least in one of the games, if not both of them. And if that happens, there's only one spot for Cancelo, that's left back. And who else was benched last night? Ake. Now, Ake could play left centre back, and it's worth noting that some journalists did say that John Stones wasn't fully fit, which is why he wasn't in the squad last night. We'll have to see what Pep Guardiola says. So it could be Laporte left centre back, Ake left back, Akanji right centre back. If that happens, there's not really any room for Cancelo. So the question is, should we sell him? I just think he's a problem going forward, and if I don't, there is a chance he plays one game, and if you're going to take a hit to get rid of him, there's a case to be made that you shouldn't take that hit. You should just let him have one game, hope he plays minutes in the second one. I'm just not as confident he's going to play in either games, and I'm kind of tempted while it's a double game week just to get rid. So if I want to get a Man City defender in, it will probably be either Ake or Akanji. They're probably the two I'm looking at. I just think, a bit like Rico Lewis, Pep Guardiola has taught Ake up a lot, and he can play in 2 different positions like Cancelo can. So Cancelo's right back, left back. Ake can play left centre back or left back, and he has been very good. And he's only 5 million, so I am tempted just to do that. Lastly, on Man City, I wouldn't completely rule out Rico Lewis either, because like I've said, I do think he'll play in at least one of the games, possibly even both of them. He's only 3.9 million, and from the transfers I've looked at, that would enable me to do Mason Mount to De Bruyne while keeping Salah and Haaland. So that is very tempting. So I can't tell you right now exactly what I'm going to do because there's just too many options. We're still waiting for possible double game week 21 confirmations. If that happens, it might change things again. But ultimately, Luke Shaw is going to come in and then possibly either Ederson or a Man City defender. And I will probably get rid of James and Cancelo. If I decide to keep Cancelo, I could still do James and Patterson to Ake and Luke Shaw. I've got enough money to do that. But it would mean benching an attacker like Mitch or Mason Mount, and I'm just not sure I want to do that. So I've kind of had enough with Cancelo. I'm tempted just to get it done in the double game week, hope it doesn't punish me too much, and obviously that will also give me more money to spend later on. So with midfield, Rashford going absolutely nowhere. He's got the double game week this week. He's in great form, and there is a chance that Man United will get another double in game week 22. So I'm definitely holding him. It's a similar situation to Martinelli and Saka. They're just good long-term options. They're providing such good value. I know some people are starting to look at Odegaard as an option, and he's great too. But I've got so many other transfers and things to worry about that one of them is not switching one of my Arsenal midfielders to a different one. So I'm holding Saka, Martinelli, and Rashford for sure. The only 2 midfielders that could go are Salah and Mason Mount. And given that Man City went out of the Carabao Cup last night and they have that confirmed fixture in game week 25, I'm a little bit more tempted to do Salah to De Bruyne because of the extra fixtures that they've got, because his minutes are good. But it would definitely be for a -4 because I've got 2 free transfers, but I feel like I have to use them on defenders. So it's whether or not Salah to De Bruyne is worth a -4. Now, some people will say that over the next 4 to 5 weeks, De Bruyne will repay that. that, and that is definitely a possibility. But if I don't think he'll necessarily pay it back this week, I could not do the transfer this week and then maybe do it later on instead. I do have a way to get De Bruyne without selling Salah. It would be Cancelo to Rico Lewis, Reece James to Luke Shaw, and Mason Mount to De Bruyne. I am very tempted to do that because I think, look, I can sit here and say that Akanji and Ake are going to get good minutes, but am I 100% sure they're going to get better minutes than Rico Lewis when he's only 3.9 million? It might be worth the risk. My only issue is it's a lot of money to then get him, you know, up to someone else. So if I did that move, Cancelo and Reece James out, I would have Rico Lewis at 3.9 million and I would have Patterson, who's obviously injured right now, at 4 million as well. That's not an ideal situation if I ever need to upgrade them. Obviously, I could just sell one of my premiums, like De Bruyne, like Salah, like Haaland, but then it's an extra 2 transfers to redistribute the funds as well. So that's why I'm not sure about that move. I think Salah to De Bruyne could work. I just don't know if I need to do it this week. So I'm a little bit up in the air with it. But last night did make me think it could be worthwhile. And also, even if I thought that Salah and De Bruyne were going to be close for points, because ultimately I do think Salah's minutes are still better. Yes, De Bruyne is going to play in the majority of games, but Man City have got a lot of games and they can, you know, bring someone else in instead. It's a lot harder, I think, for Liverpool to do that for Salah. I don't, look, De Bruyne may only miss like 1 game in the next 8, but it's more of a chance of missing out than Salah, at least in my opinion. Salah's got penalties, more goal threat, etc. But even if I thought it was close, 2 double game weeks in the next 4 weeks, or 4 game weeks, that is quite tempting. So again, not ruling it out, but you know me, I do love Salah, so I'm not sure I would do that. And then with Mason Mount, if I don't do that Kevin De Bruyne move, it's really either a Man City midfielder or a Man United midfielder. And look, I could keep Mason Mount if he does well against Fulham, and I think Chelsea are looking a little bit better because obviously they have struggled. Well, they've struggled all round, defence and attack, but they're not scored a huge amount of goals. I could keep him because the fixture run is not actually that bad for Chelsea, right? They've got Crystal Palace at home. If Liverpool double in game week 21, so would Chelsea, so I could just keep Mount for that. Then they've got Fulham in game week 22, so it's possible to keep hold of him, but he was only in my team for game week 17, 18 and 19 for the double, so getting rid of it, because he's like kind of my punt. A lot of people are on 3-4-3. I've got that extra midfield spot to take a punt, so I think he will go. Mahrez didn't start last night for Man City. So straight away, I think he definitely starts against Man United. And that's all well and good. But will he also definitely start against Spurs? Possibly. But what about after that? And that is my worry with bringing Mahrez in. And I know a lot of people are going to go for him. A lot of people are going to be talking about him. And I am going to be tempted. But we've all been here before. When he looks like a good option, you get him in. And then straight away, in another week or 2, you've got to use a transfer to get rid of him. So I'm tempted just to go for the minutes of a Man United midfielder instead, even if they're not quite as good an option. So there's a few ways that I can do it, and I know there's been a lot to take in with this video, but that's what happens with double game weeks and stuff. So one move is Cancelo to a Man City defender, either Ake or Akanji. I'll decide that later on. Reece James to Luke Shaw. Like I said, Luke Shaw will probably come in. And then Mason Mount to Fernandes. Now, I don't think, in general, Fernandes is a great option. Like, his goal threat is pretty low. He's a bit like De Bruyne. He's more likely to assist than score a goal. Apart from his attacking numbers, even for assists and stuff, are not as good. And obviously, he does cost nearly 10 million. But one thing you get with him is guaranteed minutes. And if they did get another double in 22, he could be worth that punt. The other thing I like about him is he's 9.8 million. So if I wanted to get him in and then switch, because I think ultimately I'm not that worried about having to get back to Cancelo or Trent Alexander-Arnold, so I'm happy with having a cheaper defence. At 9.8 million, if I want to switch back to 3-4-3 and I want to go for Nunez, it also gives me the money to do that later on as well. So that's one move I'm considering. If I didn't want to sell Cancelo, then I could do Patterson and James to Ake and Shaw, or again, Akanji, and I could do Mason Mount to Anthony. Again, I'm not that excited about Anthony, but his minutes are very good on that right-hand side. Like, the front 3 first choice right now is Anthony, Martial, so Anthony, the actual Anthony, then Anthony, Tony, Martial in the number 9, and then Rashford on the left. So that's an option as well. So one of these -4s, either this one or this one, is probably what I'm considering. And I think in both scenarios I can also afford the Ederson move, so I'm not completely ruling out a -8, and it's for similar reasons that I spoke about yesterday. There is not a need to have more double game week players, but in my team I've got 2 defenders that are injured, I've got Ben White with a bad fixture, I've got Cancelo that might not even play, and Mason Mount you could just say is not a great option going forward. So if that's 5 issues, there might not be an issue with taking a -4 or a -8. So that's why I'm considering it. Defensive midfield, that was a lot to talk about. Let me know what you think in the comments below. All right, so let's look at the forwards, and I want to start off by talking about two players that I'm probably not going to bring in. So one of them is Anthony Martial. A lot of you will be looking at him this week. I don't think he's necessarily a bad option, right? He's got a double game week this week, possibly one in game week 22 as well. Man United are playing pretty well, and ultimately, he's not a bad price. He's pretty good value, but I do think that Weghorst could take some minutes off him. So Man United have signed Weghorst now. I think Martial is definitely first choice, and I think when he's fit, he'll start pretty much every single game. But there are always concerns over his fitness, and Man United and Ten Hag have to think about that. They have to manage him. So if he's on the pitch and they're worried about whether he can start the next game and it gets to 60, 65 minutes, well, now they've got Weghorst they can just bring on instead. And if it gets to the point where he's got a little bit of a knock, there is a chance that Weghorst might just start the game instead. So I'm a little bit less keen on Martial. But even if you were thinking of bringing him in, I wouldn't necessarily try and put you off that. For my team, the main issue is I've either got to sell Mitrovic at a time where I think there's 4 or 5 other bigger problems, or I've got to do Greenwood to Martial and switch to a 3-4-3, which isn't necessarily a problem, but that does mean shifting funds around. And again, I've got lots of issues, and I don't think what I need to be doing right now is downgrading someone to a player that I'm probably not going to play just to get Anthony Martial. And I think for my team, when I'm on a 3-5-2, it's probably just easier to get Anthony or Fernandes. So that's one player. The other one is Harry Kane. Now, I think Harry Kane's a pretty good option this week. Yes, he's got that kind of yellow card threat. It wouldn't necessarily put me off bringing him in if I had an easy route to do it. But for me, I've either got to sell Salah, and I'm not going to take 2 transfers to shift funds from Salah to Kane. At least I don't think I'm going to. I've either got to sell Mitrovic, but again, it comes back to that same thing that, yes, Harry Kane is probably a better option than Mitrovic going forward, but in his own right, Mitrovic is really good value. So then it would come down to Greenwood to Harry Kane, and if I don't want to do that for Martial, you can imagine the kind of transfers I've got to do to fund a move from Greenwood to Kane. I just don't think it's worth it. It would be something like Cancelo down to Rico Lewis, James to Shaw, Mason Mount down to Mitoma maybe. If he had a double confirmed in 21, maybe I would do that. And then Greenwood to Kane. It's just too many transfers and not fixing enough issues. And obviously that would be 3 premium players. I think if I was going to do that, I would just do it in 3 moves and get De Bruyne instead, who's got 2 double game weeks to come. So I think Kane's a great option. I've missed out on a lot of points from him so far this week, but I just think he and Martial are just a little bit too annoying to get into my team. And I just think that Weghorst could affect Martial a little bit. Again, Martial is definitely first choice. He's going to start a majority of games, but there's always fitness worries with him for me, right? So I'd rather go for the minutes of Anthony or, again, Anthony the midfielder, or Fernandes. So Mitrovic is probably going to stay just because when he's fit, he's always going to play. Minutes are good, penalties as well. Haaland's obviously staying as well. The big thing to talk about here is the triple captain chip. Now, I do have it active. I spoke about this in the game week preview, and I want to just kind of reiterate that I'm not saying that if there's a better opportunity later on, you should just use it now and not worry about the points. That's not what I'm saying. I just think there's no guarantee that there's better points later. And what's interesting about the Carabao Cup, because Man City are out of that now, that means they won't blank in game week 25. If they had blanked in game week 25, they'd have that Bournemouth fixture to rearrange that would then have gone into another game week, and they would have had a double game week with at least one of the fixtures being Bournemouth. And maybe you could have made a case to wait for that, but that's now not going to happen. So they've got one less double game week to possibly come. And I think I do want to either captain him on the triple captain or Salah. I know people are talking about Rashford, and he's not a bad option, but it's just not who I want to use my triple captain on. So I'm probably going to use it this week, despite the fact that Man City haven't looked great. And also, Haaland has not scored in his last 2 games. I know he only came on for half-time yesterday, but still, I thought it was quite funny. But I think they will win both of these games, or there's a good chance that they do, and they will score in both games. I'm not expecting 4 or 5 goals, but that also might not matter, as I discussed yesterday. And again, it's not just about whether I can get a better score with my triple captain later on. It's about whether I can use my chips better later on. So last year, for those of you that played, you'll know that Salah got a really massive triple captain score against, I think it was Leeds and Norwich at home. And I didn't use my triple captain. He got that massive score, and obviously lots of people laughed about it. But later on, my strategy of, I think I wildcarded instead, that actually worked out a little bit better for me, and I ended up finishing in the top 10k. So it's not just about although this sounds stupid, it's not just about getting the most points for your triple captain, it's about getting the most points for your chips overall, and there is a chance that using it now and using the other chips later is a better option, just to free up extra weeks where you can use it, because you can't use like wildcard and triple captain in the same week. I might be completely wrong. When I look at it on paper, I don't really like it. If Haaland comes away with 2 blanks, I'll probably say, well, yeah, he played Man United and Spurs. That was always a possibility, but I think it's probably worth taking the risk. So that is my team as it stands. I will probably do a final thoughts video tomorrow. Obviously, I'll watch the Chelsea-Fulham game tonight to see what happens, but I think the most likely transfers right now are getting Fernandes in or getting Anthony in as part of one of those 2 moves. Yes, Man United would have a blank in game week 25. I'd have to deal with that. But when I look at the rest of my team, there's not too many other issues. Any Man City players I've got are not blanking. The Arsenal players should be fine as well. Salah's okay too. Mitrovic is always good. So unless there's injuries, I shouldn't have a huge amount of issues to deal with. Anyway, if you happen to have made it to the end, fair play, because there's a lot of waffle and talking in that. If you enjoyed it, give it a like. Hit subscribe if you haven't already. And I'll catch you again tomorrow. And who knows, maybe we'll have some more double game week news. Maybe we won't. Let's see.